Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are. This is Alec. I'm the host of the Learners Podcast. Thank you for joining us for another episode and spending some time with us. Today, we have a fun little episode. We're going to be talking to one of our speakers at UXRConf this year who has a pretty interesting topic. For those of you that don't know, don't care, or have forgotten, we've got an amazing research event coming up in June in San Francisco and online, and you're definitely not going to want to miss it. It's going to be all the biggest ideas for the year, all smushed together in one solid week of research fun. So if you haven't yet, make sure that you block off your calendar. You're not doing any research that week. Forget about it. And go over to joinlearners.com/research week. That's joinlearners.com/research-week to make sure that you got an online ticket if you haven't already, and block that day off because we're not doing any research. Brad, are we doing research that week?
No research.
No research that week. Very good. Well, I'm going to take a moment now to introduce our wonderful guest. His name is Brad Orego. I've known Brad for, how long have we known each other? Maybe like 3 or 4 years?
Oh, probably
Mostly
longer.
online.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, finally, we're going to get to hang out in person. Every time I go to New York, he's not there. Every time that, you happen to be in California or in Canada, I'm not there. So this is going to be the first time where we're for sure going to be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, we've every now and then it's usually at UXRConf as like the one time a year we actually see each other just by being in crossing paths enough times. And
yeah, that's awesome. Okay, cool. So why don't we start off like, maybe you can give folks a little bit of a preview of high level of what you're going to be talking about. And then I think the more interesting thing that I'd like to talk a little bit more with you about today is why you think this is an important and timely thing to cover. Because I certainly, when you put together that proposal, I thought this was pretty compelling. So tell us a little bit what it is and why we should be talking about this right now.
yeah, so at a high level, I think what's really interesting about this talk is like I've been working in research for a long time. I've seen a lot of different things, and even like I've sort of seen my views evolve on this over the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, where we had the reckoning, we had all this stuff happening, and everyone, woe is me, the sky is falling, and people were like, we saw a bunch of tech saw layoffs in general, but we saw layoffs hitting research, and people are like, it's because of democratization, it's because of this, it's because of this. Like at the end of the day, layoffs are always it's an expression of like what the business values and what is important to the business, right? Like it doesn't matter what your role is or what your title is or how big your company is. If you're providing value, you're not going to get laid off. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is the nature of it.
I
So
always like to say that there has never in the history of layoffs been a layoff that include quota carrying salespeople.
well, yeah, it's like a really good, oh, you're hitting and exceeding your marks. Like you're probably going to stick around one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so like that's like the background noise here of like, oh, all these layoffs are happening, and everyone had their sort of take on why it was. And at the end of the day, I'm just like, well, clearly we're not providing value. Like we as an industry have failed, and something has happened where we've gotten into this situation that we are seen as disposable. And you may think it's one reason or another, but at the end of the day, what I recognize is like we weren't really doing research that was sort of in line with business objectives. So I think a lot of research sort of came into the world as like very, very tactical. It's very easy if we sort of do this like archaeological, this like history of UX research. It's like, yeah, I think I wrote this in a blog post, a year ago, where it's like you start a company, you hire a bunch of engineers and like some salespeople. Eventually, you decide like we should probably hire some designers or like a product person or something, and then you sort of go down that route a bit, and then at some point that designer product person is like, we need some research because we have lots of questions and we can't answer them. And so it's like research has often and like historically been this like third, fourth, fifth like round of we need to scale, we need to grow, we need to sort of invest, and it wasn't like a primary function. So in that context, like, yeah, if you're a designer, when you think about research, you think about making your designs better. You think about maybe answering some questions about the problems you're trying to solve, but you're not thinking about research sort of at its core and thinking about how it can apply to the entire business and thinking about the type of value it can drive. So we've got this situation where it's like, yeah, historically we've done very like tactical, very evaluative research, and now we're trying to expand the horizons of what research is and what it can do and who it can work with, and oh, we can support marketing and customer success and sales. Like we all talk about this as this ideal, but we don't really have a pathway to get there
Hmm.
because we feel very stuck and constrained in this like 2 week sprint cycle that a lot of teams work on. Like research doesn't fit into a 2 week sprint. It
Hmm.
never really has. It probably never will. And if you try to force it into that, even if you, hey, give yourself 2 sprints, you've got 4 whole weeks to wrap up a research project, the scope of things you can tackle in 4 weeks is so small and so narrow in the grand scheme where it's like, yeah, you're just not going to be able to answer the questions that are so important to your business, like the questions of, so I got to this realization. I got to this point where, well, sort of what I'm building out at Webflow isn't even necessarily all my idea. What happened is I joined Webflow, and maybe I'm like leading the next question a bit, but yeah, I joined Webflow, and I joined the company to help scale their research team and help like enable DIY research and all sorts of other things. But I started getting these questions from our chief product officer and from other folks on the exec team. They're like, "Hey, we're thinking about making this acquisition. Can you help us? Like, can you help us make this decision? We're thinking about, this adjacency we may want to move into as a company. Like, can you help us figure out if we should make this move, if it's the right time, if this is a build buy or partner opportunity? Like,
Right.
I have my chief product officer now putting things on my roadmap that she's like, I want you to get 3 quarters out in front of where our product teams are. Like, I want you to
Hmm.
start thinking about FY27 and FY28. And I'm over here like, we just finished planning FY26. And like, you want me to think, 2, 3 years down the road, because those are the types of decisions that, at a leadership level that the board and the exec team are trying to make.
Yeah.
And I'm being asked to help with that. And, if you had asked me 4 years ago if I could do that, I probably would have said no.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, yeah, actually, I think we can. But you need
Yeah.
to sort of adapt to, like, it's a different way of working.
I think that's and what you just said there, I think, is the key, and what I'm excited for you to dig into your talk, which is, I mean, I can't even recall how many times we've heard this phraseology around like, we don't have time for generative research, or okay, I got 2 weeks to do generative research, and that sort of thing. And I think one of the key things that is going to be really exciting, and I think people are going to learn a lot from, is you're diagnosing this as a problem of, you're trying to fit something that is just like research. It's also research. Both these things are research. This is just a completely different animal than the research that you are used to when you're doing, say, more traditional or common UX research, evaluating prototypes, interviewing users, trying to figure out what the next feature is. And I think that'll be really eye-opening for people, because you've actually achieved some success by essentially bifurcating research into these two modalities that we're not going to dig into quite yet, because we got to save something for June.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about it is like, it both is and is not very different. Like the core exercise of doing research, and I mean, I started talking about this at least a year ago, where I'm like, we talk about design research, market research, user research, UX research, product research. Like we have all these things in front of this title research, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
just call it research, because at the end
Yeah.
of the day, the core practice is kind of the same, right? Whether you're talking to potential customers or churned users or your like agency partner, whatever it may be, right? Like you're still doing research. So in this sort of new world that, we'll talk about more in June, it's like the core practice, the core, like once you get down to executing research, it's still kind of the same thing, right? You
Mm-hmm.
still sort of build your research plan, you pick your method and your audience, like that doesn't change. It's really sort of the structure and like the metadata around it of like, okay, yeah, what timelines are we operating on? What types of questions are we trying to answer? What stakeholders are we working with? What updates are we providing? Like, yeah, it's like instead of trying to do this like 2 week sprint type of thing, some of these things we're tracking on like a month over month basis, and we're tracking these things for years. And I mean, it's been 9 months since I joined Webflow, but like we have these long term horizons where we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to see, is there an inflection point? Is there something changing about what we're hearing from customers, or yeah, how many people are even talking about and interested in this thing? Like
Hmm.
it's like having a lot of continuous research programs that are running, and you're just waiting for the interest in one of them to spike, because that's giving us a signal that, oh, maybe we should, like maybe it's time to start to invest in one of these, 10 or 15 topics we're tracking.
Yeah. Moving on a bit to, because we're going to get into a lot of the tactics in your talk and how you break it down and all that sort of stuff. If we just look at that kind of the end result, I'd love to know a little bit about how has your relationship evolved with specifically the executives that you work with. You mentioned like, hey, the chief product officer DM me being like, hey, can you put this on your research, figure this out at some point over the next few quarters or whatever. Um, how does your relationship evolve? How do you actually work with folks? Because I feel like, when we're talking about on a more tactical level, right? We have these um, a lot of rituals that maybe that we're used to and whatnot that I don't think is how executives like to think about things and how they operate and that sort of thing. So, what does that working relationship look like for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because there's a few different ways to think about and to answer this. Like, for one, they really don't care about the minutia of the research that you did. At the end of the day,
Yeah,
like
let's pause right there. Let's repeat it for the folks in the back. How many times are they asking about your sample size and the methods and all that stuff? Big fat
they,
zero.
we will, this is actually interesting. Our CFO cares a lot about like sample and whatnot, but other than that,
That's
like,
funny.
yeah, and it's really funny because we'll, our data science team or someone will put up a dashboard and he'll look at it and be like, like I have questions about your analysis here, which is really cool. Like I'm here for it. Yeah, like let's
Yeah.
get into the details. But generally speaking, and I coach my researchers on this all the time. Like they'll do their research, they'll put their research, summary together, and I'm like, okay, you need to rewrite your executive summary to 3 bullet points.
Hmm.
Like if there's only 3 things that people learn from this, what is that? The other thing that we're working on doing a lot, sort of, especially working at the executive level, is like you'll do one research study, you'll do some interviews, usability tests, whatever. You will learn the things you learned from that study. There's an extra layer of like meta analysis that needs to happen, where it's basically like, okay, here's what we learned here in this one study, and here's how it fits into everything else that we know about our customers on this topic. Like, I think
Hmm.
a lot of research teams never get to that next level. It's like you've got your raw data, you've got your research summaries, and then there's this like extra, yeah, like meta analytic level that people don't get to. So it's just like the deliverables are very different, right? They're not going to read your research summary. They just won't. They don't care, right?
Yeah, that was last year at UXRConf. There was a talk by this guy who used to work for the Oakland Athletics. He helped invent Moneyball, and one of the things that was really interesting was he was emphasizing that you can have like projects that are small sample sizes at a time, but they add up into a much larger sample. And as long as you're tying all these things together, there's like a common thread throughout, you can build a tremendous amount of confidence in that data. And so to your point, it's not just like, okay, the confidence level you have in a finding per se, but it's also like what is the grander story that all these things, all these projects tie into. Um, that's a really great point that I think we probably need to internalize a bit more.
Yeah, yeah. Because again, like they don't care about the specific details of any one study. They care about what's the big. Like I think about it as like what's the so what.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, we did some research, great. So what? Like
Mm-hmm.
what decisions do we need to make? What does that mean sort of in the context of everything else that we know? Um, yeah, I mean, if you're lucky, they'll watch like a 4 minute, 5 minute Loom video on like 2x speed, right? Like there's
Is
so
that
much
all the time
information.
you're going to get, you think, to like actually get them to look at primary data is like making a quick highlight reel? Like they might watch that.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's something we're experimenting with of like how much, yeah, are we bringing highlight reels into, because and maybe I'm bearing the lead a bit, like we have sort of this monthly check-in with, it's sort of an open forum for anyone on the exec team to show up, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
the insights function, which is research, data science, analytics, and machine learning, basically saying, hey, here's all the stuff that we've done recently, like we just want to give you an update on what we've learned. And we'll, have conversation there, but we field questions async mostly. Like we get DMs, from our leaders saying,
Right.
hey, here's the thing. Because what happens is like they have an idea, they want to get it like off of their plate and into someone else's brain as quickly as they can so that they
Mm-hmm.
don't forget. So
Mm-hmm.
like we just get DMs from people not all the time, but fairly often, execs are like, hey, we were just having this conversation and we were in a board meeting. I want to make sure we follow up on this. Like, can you, put this on your backlog, like put this on
Mm-hmm.
your roadmap is actually something that some folks had to learn at Webflow, where it's like, just because you get a DM from someone with a C in their title does not mean you should drop everything and answer
Right.
that question right now. Like, they don't expect an immediate response. They understand that your team is working on things and it takes time. Like, it's not like everyone stop what you're doing because the C blank O wanted. It's like they just want to get it on your backlog. They want to get
Mm-hmm.
it out of their brain and on your radar. So yeah, a lot of times these meetings are us like recapping, like, hey, we got these requests, or like, you want us to look into these things. Here's the status of those. Here's when you can anticipate a response by, because yeah, it takes time and people are busy or whatever it may be. Um, and yeah, we're experimenting in those meetings of like, and actually, honestly, in all of our meetings, like we've talked about the company all hands, the like once a month, all 700 or whatever employees, like, should there be a 5 minute like insights update in those meetings? Like, should we be at product design monthly and product management monthly? And like, should we show up at everyone else's meeting and be like, hey, here's just like a cool little thing that we learned because we think it's interesting and we think you might think it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We're experimenting a lot with what it looks like to get the primary data out
Yeah.
to people. um, but yeah, like just working at that executive summary level, working at that like, and it's, I think that's one, I just sort of mentioned this, but like one of the big things that has changed is we have a roadmap now, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we have a set of priorities, we have a concrete, like, here are the things that we're going to deliver in these quarters, and it's just Q1 and Q2, right? This is not a major planning thing. Like, we're not planning more than a few months in advance. But what that allows us to do is, what we get requests in from our product partners, we get requests in from other execs, and we can say, hey, I see your request, I hear you. However, here are our priorities. And like, I don't think this is more important than that. I think that's one thing that maybe a lot of research leaders don't necessarily do, is to have an opinion on what your priorities should be, instead of letting, product or someone else dictate that. It's like for you to say, nope, these things are more important for our business
Yeah.
and these things are more interesting. We will get to your request eventually.
But how did you come up with your mental model for what you think matters to the company? Like, were you reading financial documents, interviewing execs, looking at historical stuff, digging in with data science? How did you form your perspective of like, no, these are going to be the priorities for what we think the company needs to learn about? Obviously, you take input from people when they think they should change, but in general, like, you have to have a starting point of what you believe matters, right?
Yeah, it's a really, I mean, it's essentially the way that I did this. I realized, like, I kept saying like everything's a good question, so I will stop myself from doing this. No, it's essentially what I did. So I joined in July. I spent all of like Q3 and part of Q4 understanding our business, understanding, yeah, what are sort of the top line, bottom line, what are the core metrics, what does our, like, all of our sales cycle look like, and then I kind of waited for people to come up with their roadmap
Mhm.
for Q1 and Q2, and then I found the gaps. At the end of the day, I'm like, okay, so I had a quarter or two of
Oh,
input
interesting.
on the types of requests that we were getting from product. Like, okay, so here's the things that they're asking us about. Diagnose that and say, hey, they're asking these questions, but there's sort of a bigger question behind this that no one is asking.
Hmm.
So like that's one set of inputs. Then
Can you give
I
me like a hypothetical example? Like, obviously you can't share anything from Webflow, but
yeah,
could you make up a scenario that can illustrate that point a little bit?
I mean, this sort of applies to anyone that has, so I mean, Webflow, it's a website builder, right? Like, you have companies that are using your product to deliver their services. We have
Hmm.
these agency partners and whatnot.
Hmm.
And we get lots of questions of like, how do what do our agency partners think about this feature? Or like, how do our agency partners like get their new customers? Or like, we're getting these questions that I think are very like tactical in nature, very much like, we want to launch a new thing, we want to make sure our partners are on board with it.
Hmm.
What do they think? And I sort of looked at a bunch of these requests and sort of the state of the knowledge that we had. and recognize that like we don't really understand a lot about these people. Like we don't understand their day to day. We don't
Right.
understand how they interact with their customers. We don't understand where they go to find customers. We don't understand where they go to, like, how do they make the decision of what business to take and what not, right? So
Yeah.
I just recognize that like we're getting a lot of requests that are, I guess, surface level in a way, instead of like
Hmm.
sort of digging into the deeper understanding of what their priorities are, what their fears are, what their motivators are. And it just, yeah, it was like we need to do some foundational knowledge gathering and sort of this like, yeah, very sort of basic research in a lot of ways. Because and this is sort of what we're proving out right now, is like my hypothesis was that if we answer these deeper questions, we will then generate fewer of those questions sort of at the tail end when we get to the point of like, all right, we're delivering this roadmap, we're building this feature, we have lots of specific questions about that feature. Like we can make more intelligent assumptions if we have this sort of foundational knowledge.
So can I, to summarize then, I think what you're saying is you're getting all pinged with all these questions that are very uh, precise and specific about, let's say, agency partners, like, how many people work on a project, where their leads coming from, all that sort of stuff. And you're saying, okay, well, it sounds like we have this fundamental lack of understanding about how our agency partners' businesses operate and what makes them successful. And so then you're saying, all right, we're going to go do a research project where we really get into building this model of like what a growing and successful agency partner looks like, and the things that are going well for them, the things that are frustrating for them. And then it kind of reframes all of these tactical questions that come, because many of those individuals might be like, oh, that's an irrelevant question. Now I don't even need to ask it. Sometimes you'll have answered it already, but perhaps the new types of unanswered questions are more interesting and more helpful than the original ones you have, because you've diagnosed we have this bigger problem here of this foundational understanding of who the agency partner is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The way, like, I think the one example I give, like, specifically in this agency world, is that someone's like, oh, we're building this, so in Webflow world, like, you build a website and then you need to transfer it to your client at some point, like
Right.
site transfer. People are asking questions about that. And I'm over here thinking, do we understand how Webflow is enabling or inhibiting our agency partners from doing their jobs, from selling their business, from
Right.
interacting with their clients? Like, because that is such a bigger question, and we have specifics like, oh, how is site transfer supposed to work? You're like, well, how do they do this currently?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does this experience look like? What are the things that they care about? What we have a brand survey going out pretty soon, asking like specifically for agency partners and whatnot, and like asking them like, hey, in the past 12 months, which of these topics have come up in client conversations?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are they asking you about SEO? Are they asking you about AI? Are they asking you about design systems, right? Like, what are the topics, what are the conversations you're having with your customers that we need to know about as the people enabling you to do your job?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I know, like, Shopify, for example, one of their huge sources of revenue is through agencies that build their storefronts, design and actually construct the storefronts. And they did this super smart thing where they said, you know what, if you build a storefront for somebody, like make a successful Shopify storefront for a customer, you're going to get a percentage of their revenue in perpetuity as the builder of their store. Well, guess what? It's like now you have a real incentive, and now you've solved a huge problem for that agency, which is cash flow, right? So essentially, they get like a percentage of the equivalent of the credit card processing fees or
Hmm.
something like that. As how it's like you get some fraction of a percent of revenue, but you get, if you do a huge brick and mortar business and you bring them online, like that could be a lot of money. And so the deeper problem for the agency is like retaining clients over the long term and the cash flow stuff, and knowing that allowed them to essentially create a new revenue opportunity for those agencies from that deeper understanding.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is like it creates aligned incentives where it's like, okay, you as an agency want to keep people on Shopify. You want to keep them
Yeah.
happy and keep them, growing and successful. So yeah, that's actually really interesting. There's a revenue sharing model in Webflow, but um, I'll
Well,
yeah.
it also can obviate, to your point around migrating websites. It can obviate the need to do it at all. It's like, why doesn't the agency can charge the company a retainer that's pretty small? They'll make any modifications and changes, and they just continue to have the fees that gets paid out.
Hmm.
Um, One thing I wanted to make sure that we had some time to touch on too, because you've been, again, you've been hiring. There's lots of people who are interested in work right now. Um, and like the typical job, you're probably getting like what, like 1,000, 2,000 applications, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. We had one research role, US or Canada. I think we got 1,300 applicants in the first week, and my recruiter was like, "We got to shut this off." Like I can't.
Yeah, we're done, guys. You got to get that application in early these days because it's just overwhelming.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Um, what I think something that would be helpful to kind of dig into a little bit is I think there's a lot of change in the research role right now, both of it from the perspective of wanting greater impact and greater efficiency. There's the AI stuff. There's the model of like let's say in 2021 we were embedding researchers everywhere because why not? And now that's not happening as much. When you're looking at, say you look at a bunch of resumes, or even like you do first pass interviews or whatever it happens to be, can you speak to like what are some of the things where that you see where the researcher is obviously super talented, smart, they've accomplished stuff, but they're maybe they're missing the point, or this is not the direction you think the field is going, and they need to consider a pivot in your point of view. Is there anything that kind of comes to mind that fits that bill?
Yeah, so I think this is something that's going to vary a lot based on the company. I mostly, well, pretty much exclusively have worked with startups. No, more recently, I'm doing like late stage sort of scale up, growth stage startups. And if you are a team of 1,000 and you're at, Google or Facebook or whatever, the you're going to be like your scope is just going to be much more narrow.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just talking to one of our recruiters today. We've got an open role right now, and she was like, "What types of things should I be looking for?" Because people use this word strategy,
Oh boy.
and that means like three or four different things. So I kind of broke it down for her. I was like, "Okay, so we're hiring a manager. They'll talk about research strategy in the sense of picking which methods to use. That is something like any senior IC will do.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's we're not looking for that. You will see managers talk about strategy in the sense of like I decide what my team works on. That any manager should do. That's not spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
What we're looking for is someone who is influencing the decisions that their stakeholders make. Like if you are saying, "Hey, the product team wanted to do this thing, we did some research and they've changed their mind." Like that's the type of thing that we're looking for. So for us, for Webflow, for the type of company that we are, whether it's an IC role or a management role, it's that ability to understand the business enough that you are like, okay, here's what my colleagues are trying to accomplish. Here's what the PMs and designers ultimately want to do. They want to drive some sort of business metric. Otherwise, why are we launching features and why are we, adding things? So whether it's retention or if it's activation, like figure out what that metric is
Mm-hmm.
and then do the research that's going to drive the decisions to change that metric. And this is like a really hard thing to like putting this on a resume. I think is really difficult because how do you encapsulate that? How do you say, hey, we were doing one thing and then like we don't have a good metric in the research world. Like we talk about the ROI of research, like how do you measure the amount of change you cause to a roadmap? Like
Super
how do
hard.
you, yeah, like how do you measure that? How do you say, and I quite literally have done case studies where I'm like, here was the roadmap before, here's the roadmap after, and like shown the shuffling of priorities where these things were down here beforehand, and then we did some research, and those are now like, you sort of make this like map of before and after. Like
Oh, that's clever.
if you have the foresight to do it, like capture the roadmap, do your research, share your findings, and then capture the roadmap afterwards, because you can hopefully, if you've done something interesting, you can see the priorities shift and you can actually map like this was number 2 before, now it's number 10, and this was number 15 and now it's number 1, right? Like
That is quite clever. So essentially, for everybody who's listening, Because obviously there's going to be, you're going to forget, and also some of this stuff might become a little bit more, or is confidential. So if you can find a way to capture, like just thinking back the last few months, the last year, um, some examples of where priorities have shifted and track them down somewhere, then when it comes time to update your CV or portfolio or whatever it is that you're putting together, you have something that's a little bit fresh that you can speak to, even if you have to change what those items are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like it doesn't matter what the actual content of the roadmap is, but if you can say number 15 went to number one, that's
That's
a
good.
pretty cool thing.
Yeah. Um, as we're wrapping up here, what's one thing that you're excited to learn more about, either at Research Week or in general, that's top of mind for you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, we sort of alluded to this a bit earlier. There's a lot of stuff happening in like the AI world, both for research and just like for the tech and product world in general. I think we're talking to a bunch of vendors right now to try to figure out what our tool stack should look like. So many of these companies are just throwing AI at like at their product in a way that
Yeah,
doesn't really solve problems. We're
but it
specifically
sure looks cool.
oh yeah, we're talking to we're looking at different like insights repos and
Yeah.
there's like this convergence of the voice of the customer type like sauce and interpret and like dovetail channels of like hey give us every single piece of like Zendesk ticket, give us every Reddit thread, give us every Twitter, give us everything and we'll try to find sense out of it.
Hmm.
Those tools are smashing together with our traditional insights repos in a way that I actually think is not productive. Like if
Hmm.
I come in with a bunch of qualitative data and a hypothesis and I need to like get the themes out of what we heard, I don't need every single like Reddit comment about that infiltrating my research, right? Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
this so I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to use AI in a really interesting way that gives us like superpowers in a lot of ways. So one small example that we are doing at Webflow right now is that we have, with OpenAI and ChatGPT, we have trained a research like planning assistant for our
Oh,
DIY
yes.
researchers. So when someone is starting a research project and they're not a researcher, even if you are a researcher, I'm like, hey, before you submit your insights request, go to this bot and answer, like go through this script because
Yeah.
it's going to spit out to you like your key research questions, your business objectives. It'll suggest a method for you. It will try to write you some sample like interview questions, right? Like
Hmm.
it's getting people so much further along so that the first conversation they have with a research partner isn't like, I want to talk about this thing. Like we have something to work on and it's really, really cool. There's also, there's a few like Outset and a few other companies that are doing this like AI moderated interview thing
Hmm.
or research thing. Um, Really interested in that, looking into how we might utilize that, what that looks like in a B2B context, because I'm a little hesitant about, all their like, hey, let's talk about your fitness routine. I'm like, that's cool. You have a lot more to draw from there, but like the
Right.
context of doing this, in a website builder is maybe different than talking to someone
Yeah.
about their travel habits. So,
That's
um,
funny.
yeah, I think there's like some really interesting ways to leverage AI that are solving real problems instead of just like slapping it on top of whatever you're doing and being like, we have AI.
I think this is like one of the key things about this moment is like we're now in, take put like an engineer's hat on right now. How do we, the technology is real. How do we config in the products are not always fully baked, right? So how do we configure this stuff to help us in ways that are predictable and reliable? I keep, whenever I talk with people who've started like AI related research companies, I'm like, you cannot have a black box, right? If a researcher doesn't understand how you're doing the analysis, how you're deciding what questions to ask, that is a big problem because it just means that they don't, it's garbage in, garbage out. We don't know how this material was produced. We don't know if it's reproducible, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, I can't trust it. And if I lose the trust of my colleagues because I don't know how these insights came about, then I have nothing, right? So I think that's a really interesting point. I'm definitely excited about a lot of the potential options here with where things are going, and hopefully, as researchers, we can take um, a leading, be proactive in shaping these things in ways that we think are helpful.
Yeah, I mean, engage with your vendors as much as you can,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, I somewhat flippantly said it on on LinkedIn, but I was like, don't talk to the frontline people, talk to the CEO, right? Like, don't
Yeah,
talk
they'll
to the sales
literally
rep.
take your DM, your email every day of the week. You just
Yeah.
hit them up. Don't even worry about it. Um, Awesome. Okay, cool. So this was super interesting. I think there's a lot of really great tactical advice here, all complementary to Brad's super fun and awesome talk. I have a sneak peek. Okay, it's going to be great. So you're not going to want to miss it. UXRConf is the biggest research event of the year. So head on over to joinlearners.com/research-week to make sure that you have your either online or in-person ticket. Like, obviously, they're free because that's what we do. So there's no reason to miss out on that. And if you are looking for new opportunities to connect to the community, mentor other people, looking for some more advice, please just shoot me a DM or an email because there's some neat stuff that we're working on that I'd love to share with you when the time is right. So, Brad, thank you so much for joining me. It's so great to chat with you again. We get to hang out in person once every, whatever, 2-3 years. Our
Something like
time is coming. This will be fun.
yeah, looking forward to it. This was a good chat. I mean, if anyone listening has questions on anything, yeah, shoot me a message on LinkedIn or whatever. I can talk about research and research ops and all this stuff all day. So
Brad's a great resource. I'd take him up on it if I were you. Cool. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Talk to you soon.
thanks, everyone.